Every time you apologize for something you should not have apologized for, you lose something you cannot get back. Not dignity in the abstract, not self-respect as a concept. Something operational. Something that governs how every person in your life calculates your value, your strength, your willingness to be pushed further. An apology is not just words. It is a transfer of power. It is a signed document that says, I accept that I was wrong, that you were right, and that your judgment of my behavior carries more authority than my own.
When that document is accurate, when you genuinely caused harm, when the wrong was real, it is the correct and necessary thing to produce. But most apologies people give are not accurate. They are reflexive, conditioned, the result of a lifetime of training that taught you to manage other people's discomfort by accepting responsibility for it. Machiavelli watched this pattern destroy men who should have been untouchable, capable men, intelligent men, men who had built real power and real influence, who handed it away one unnecessary apology at a time until there was nothing left to protect. He identified 5 specific things that a man who wishes to retain his power must never apologize for. Not because apology is always weakness, because these 5 things, apologized for, signal something to the people around you that can never be fully unsignaled. Listen carefully. You have been apologizing your entire life for things that required no apology. You apologize for taking up space, for having a strong opinion,
for not being available when someone wanted you available, for succeeding in ways that made other people feel the distance between where they are and where you are, for setting a boundary that inconvenienced someone who had been ignoring your interests for years. You do it automatically, before the other person has even indicated that an apology is expected. This is not politeness. Machiavelli would be surgical about this distinction. Politeness is a strategic tool deployed deliberately to achieve a specific relational outcome. What you are doing is not strategic. It is compulsive.
The behavioral residue of a childhood in which making yourself smaller was the price of safety. Machiavelli observed that every stable power structure requires a class of people who apologize and a class of people who are apologized to. The structure does not announce this. It simply trains you, from the earliest possible age, which class you belong to. And then it waits to see if you will ever figure out that the assignment was arbitrary. Before the 5, understand the mechanism. Machiavelli wrote in the Discourses that men will take whatever you allow them to take. When you apologize for something that did not require apology, you are not simply managing the moment. You are teaching the person across from you something about the boundaries of what they can take from you. And what is trained once will be repeated. What is repeated becomes the terms of the relationship. The unnecessary apology does not close the incident. It opens an account, and the person who received it will return to make withdrawals. 5 things. 5 open accounts you must close permanently, starting now. Number 1, your ambition. Never apologize for your ambition. Not to the people who find it threatening. Not to the people who call it arrogance. Not to the people who wrap their resentment in the language of concern. Machiavelli was unambiguous. He wrote that ambition is so powerful a passion in the human breast that it is never satisfied, however high we attain. He did not write this as a warning. He wrote it as a description of the mechanism by which capable people impose their will on circumstances, rather than being shaped by them. The people who pressure you to apologize for your ambition are not concerned about your well-being. They are concerned about the distance your ambition creates between where you are going and where they have decided to remain. Your movement makes their stillness visible. Francesco Sforza, born with nothing, no title, no inheritance, refused to apologize for the scale of what he wanted. He was called dangerous, presumptuous, destabilizing. He became Duke of Milan and founded a dynasty. The people who called him presumptuous are historical footnotes. He is not. Your ambition is not a personality flaw requiring apology. It is the only engine you have. Do not apologize for the size of the engine. Build something worthy of it.
Number 2, your boundaries. Never apologize for your boundaries. Not when someone pushes against them and calls your limit selfishness. Not when someone tests them and calls your refusal coldness. Not when someone violates them repeatedly and then, when you finally enforce the consequence, frames themselves as the victim of your reaction. Machiavelli understood borders as the fundamental unit of power. A state without defensible borders is not a state. It is a territory waiting to be absorbed. A person without enforced limits is not a person exercising freedom.
They are a resource being managed by whoever has learned that their limits do not hold. A boundary that is stated but never enforced is not a boundary. It is a preference wearing the clothing of a boundary. And preferences, in Machiavelli's world, are taken as invitations. He wrote that men must either be caressed or annihilated, because they will avenge small injuries but cannot avenge great ones. A limit that is apologized for is a limit that has been partially yielded, and a partial yield registers as evidence that the rest of it can also be moved. Never apologize for the border. Enforce it, and let the enforcement be the only statement you make.
Number 3, your silence. Never apologize for your silence. Not when someone interprets it as hostility and demands an explanation. Not when someone fills it with their own meaning and then reacts to the meaning they invented. Not when the room expects noise from you and your silence makes them uncomfortable enough to pressure you into producing it. Silence is not the absence of a response. It is a response, and it is frequently the most powerful one available because it forces the other party to operate without the information they need to calibrate their position. The person who speaks fills the room with data, their reasoning, their vulnerabilities, their negotiation position. The person who stays silent forces the speaker to make assumptions.
Cesare Borgia, the most feared man in Renaissance Italy, the man Machiavelli studied most closely when writing The Prince, was described by his contemporaries as a man of very few words. He would sit across from ambassadors, heads of state, military commanders, and say almost nothing. He would listen. He would observe. He would occasionally ask one precise question. Then, silence again. The ambassadors went home rattled, not because he had threatened them, because they could not read him. And a man you cannot read is a man you cannot prepare against. Number 4, your success. Never apologize for your success. Not by minimizing it in conversation, not by performing false modesty about what you have built, not by framing your achievements in language designed to make people who have not achieved them feel less aware of the distance. Machiavelli wrote that men are more ready to repay an injury than a benefit because gratitude is a burden while revenge is a pleasure. The people closest to your success are frequently the ones most invested in finding its flaw, not out of malice, out of the psychological necessity of reducing the discomfort produced by being near something they cannot match. Lorenzo de' Medici, Il Magnifico, did not apologize for the breadth of his capability. He understood that his success was not a social liability requiring management. It was the foundation of his influence, his protection, and his ability to continue operating at the level he had built. He let his success speak. He let the discomfort it produced in others be their problem to manage. You built what you built. It required what it required. The people who are made uncomfortable by the result were not there for the construction. They do not get a vote on the architecture, and they do not deserve an apology for the height of the building. Number 5, your nature. Never apologize for your nature. This is the deepest one, the one that costs the most when violated and produces the most permanent damage when the violation is sustained across years. Your nature is the sum of your actual values, your actual responses, your actual way of moving through the world, stripped of the performance, stripped of the conditioning, stripped of decades of training in how to be less threatening, less intense, less inconvenient, less yourself. Machiavelli wrote that a person who subordinates their actual nature entirely to the expectations of others does not become safer. They become less real. And a person who is less real has less to protect and less to build with. Every apology for your nature is a small amputation. And the accumulation of small amputations is how a person arrives at 40 years old not knowing who they actually are anymore, knowing only who they have learned to perform. Machiavelli lost everything external in 1513. His position, his title, his income. What he retained was his nature, the mind, the way of seeing, the refusal to perform smallness even in exile. And from that retained nature, in a farmhouse with nothing, he built something that outlasted everything that had been taken from him. Stop apologizing for what you are. It is the only thing that is entirely yours, and it is the only thing from which anything worth having can actually be built. 5 things. 5 open accounts that have been draining you. Now look at your actual life and count the cost. Machiavelli would ask you one cold, surgical question. Who benefits from your apology? Not in the abstract. Specifically, in each of the 5 categories. Map the beneficiaries. In almost every case, you will find the person who benefits is the one most invested in the version of you that is smaller, quieter, more manageable, more available. They may love you, but in this specific transaction, they are extracting something from you that you are giving away without understanding the price. The apology you owe, the one that is accurate, specific, and genuinely corrective, is one of the most powerful tools available to a person who understands the difference. It acknowledges real harm. It repairs real damage. Machiavelli did not counsel the elimination of apology. He counseled precision about when it was warranted. When you stop apologizing for the 5 things, ambition, boundaries, silence, success, nature, you do not become harder. You become clearer. The relationships that survive the removal of unnecessary apology are the ones built on something real. The ones that required your smallness to function will resist the change. Some of them will not survive it. Let them not survive it. You are not safer small. You are just smaller. And small is not a foundation. It is a starting point that some people never leave because they were never told they were allowed to. You are told now. Stop apologizing. Start building. 5 things, publicly. The specific psychological mechanisms through which unnecessary apology is extracted from capable people, the dark architecture of relationships built on the systematic harvesting of your concessions, and the precise counter-strategies Machiavelli documented for dismantling those dynamics, none of that survives the algorithm. It exists behind the join button. Most people will accept the 5 and go back to apologizing for all of them by next week. The ones who come through the join button are the ones who understood that the 5 was the introduction. The real work starts there.